So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and particularly the high school students who are here to be part of this. And we're looking forward to your questions, okay? No softball questions for us, all hardball questions for you guys. I mean, after all, we're the generation that screwed it up, and you get to fix it. So you should give us what we deserve. So thank you, Katie, for telling us all about stuff. The stuff we measure, which is good, the stuff we pay for, and then doing stuff, which I thought was a great way for her to outline all that today. So before we start, I do want to say something, because my real boss, Tani, is here, that I have to say, I said this last year, and I want to say it again. We are a nonpartisan organization. We steer it down the middle and annoy everybody some of the time, and even a few people all of the time. But I want to reemphasize that when we are criticizing policies, because that's what we do, that is not partisan, okay? And ask the current governor and ask the last governor about that, and they will tell you the same thing. So we focus on policies and the research needed to inform policies, and we try to be fearless about speaking up when we see if there is a problem with policies. So that's a pretty obvious caveat for today's discussion on what we're going to talk about. So before we start, I just want to tell you, we've got a great panel together, and most of these people are almost all of these people are very familiar to you. Now, the first one is Caitrin Chappelle, that you heard about. Caitrin is a very dear friend of many years, and she helped me and Ellen Hannock build the Water Policy Center. In fact, most of its success derives from her, not me and Ellen, and mostly it was the way she managed me and Ellen. So she's the Nature Conservancy and Associate Director of their California Water Program. Alison Collins has changed jobs, and you may all want to talk to her, ask her if this was really a smart idea. She's now basically running the Division of Integrated Science and Engineering for the State Water Project. Most of you know Alison from her time in Metropolitan Water District at this time. David Guy, which, by the way, on my notes here it says Professor David Guy. Awesome. That's right. David Guy is the president of the Northern California Water Association, and well known to all of you. David is a regular go-to guy for us to bounce ideas off of. He knows where every drop goes in the Sacramento Valley and what happens to it. And by far our favorite farmer is Canon Michael. Yes, this is a burden you have to bear. And he's president and CEO of Bowles Farming Company, and he also is the chair of the San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority. And he serves on many boards, including our advisory board here at PPIC. And he's our favorite farmer because he is never shy about telling us when we're screwing it up. And it's great. You can expect an email from him very quickly, and I've been on the receiving end of some of those when you have blown it. So it's all right. And the last is he won't be hurt by the fact that I'll call him a grizzled veteran. Many of you know Pete Silva and known him from years ago in his time here in Sacramento, and he's president of Silva Silva International, which is a civil engineering firm. He's got 43 years and, as he calls himself, described water buffalo, and a whole lot of time in it. And I've known Pete for forever, from his time at the State Water Board. So lucky us, we have this group for us today. And I do want to remind you, turn off your cell phone. And the second thing I'm going to do, we're going to get to a Q&A at the end of all of this, and so tee up your questions for us. And those of you who are online, you also have been told how to send in questions online as well, so do that. Okay, so I will sit down and not shut up, but let me at least sit down. It's year in, year out for our priorities. We are always talking about the huge array of challenges. I mean, in fact, it's a target-rich environment, right? We always got something to talk about in terms of the challenges for water. Think about Sigma as being the one we've talked about the most lately. But now we have this new wrinkle, which is an unreliable federal partner. I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying that. Some of the changes we've watched over this year, and we don't actually really know day to day what that federal partner is going to do, and that's a big deal in water. I mean, as Katie was telling us, describing to us, the involvement of federal is at all levels. There isn't anybody on this stage who doesn't have the federal government involved in their day to day. So, Ken, and I want to start with you in all of this because you're my favorite farmer, after all. And don't just tell us what you're growing this winter. What I want to know is what's happening south of the Delta. Can you identify impacts south of the Delta of this new federal uncertainty. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yes, I certainly think we can. I think, the initial excitement over maybe that we found a magical faucet that was going to bring water and Pacific Northwest was going to yield, all this new supply has dwindled to the reality that, we are being hamstrung by the loss of a lot of really good people in a lot of our federal agencies. I think, to me, that's one of the number one concerns is losing a lot of good people. And that's not to say, you hear things about $500 toilet seats and waste in government and things like that. But, human beings aren't toilet seats. Human beings are doing a lot of, really worthwhile activities that help us run our system. And so, it's been very challenging to see a lot of very competent people leaving positions that are very needed. Also taking, again, waste is something I think we need to probably look at anyway. It's always good, even in our company, we do things like that. But taking a hatchet approach and not being strategic and, like the accounting department of reclamation, for example, having people just leave en masse because they were, it wasn't done in a way that was coordinated. So you had certain segments of reclamation being gutted while others maybe stayed with some more people. So, what that means from an operational standpoint is just, and just from a process standpoint, being able to get contracts signed, being able to get just nuts and bolts things done just becomes much more complicated. And I think for the long term, what concerns me is that, we've kind of treated the government worker sector as a group now that I worry how many people are going to want to get involved in those jobs as we go forward. These are people who a lot of times are mission driven and have, a feeling of obligation to serve our government and to serve us in those roles. And so I think, again, to throw a pretty dark cloud over our governmental workers is something that has not been very healthy, and it also hamstrings our system in a lot of ways. So, we have enough volatility with climate, we've got enough volatility with, a lot of competing regulations and things, and so now we're at a situation where we don't have the tools a lot of times on the federal side, and I don't know how rebuilding that capacity is going to be tough. So it's a big challenge.
Well, so that actually that leads to you, David, because you're now north of Delta. You're the guy looking at the big agricultural region north of the Delta, and you, particularly in the north of Delta. I know Andy Fecco is here, and others that are part of this sort of broad expanse of people who are dealing with the entire watershed. So I mean, you are affected by everything that happens in that watershed. So. I don't know. How's it going for you? I mean, let's put top of your worry list. What it might be. Like maybe Shasta operations or something like that. What are the biggest things that are affecting you?
Yeah, thank you. Well, boy, great to see everybody here. What a great group of folks. Great to see all the friends and colleagues here. And thanks for the conversation today. I think the federal dynamic, is pretty self-evident to everybody. I guess, though, maybe just to start to offer a little different thought, I don't know that this is particularly unusual. I think if you look historically, there's always been ebbs and flows. There's changes in administrations, and you work through this, basically every 2 to 4 years. And so I think, and I say that, not to diminish the fact that we do have the challenges that Ken had talked about, you've talked about, but I don't think we can think about despair, right? It's easy to kind of get into that loop of, oh God, there's no hope here. And I think we need to keep the hope. So let's all keep the hope together. With that said, I think is what we haven't seen is we've now seen a change in an administration where you kind of are trying to get a sense of the new priorities of an administration, which it happens anytime there's a change. And we're going to see that, by the way, in another year in the state. So let's brace ourselves for that too. And then we also have seen the reduction in the workforce. And that, I think, has been to see that together is what I see as the challenge. Because I think this administration is starting to develop it, the federal administration is starting to develop its priorities. I think there's actually a really good set of priorities that are emerging from the administration, but do they have the personnel to be able to implement those, I think is the question. I will say, I think let's give a shout out to our federal colleagues because they're all doing amazing work. They're all working through it. A lot of them work through the shutdown. There's a lot of really good work that's being done, and I think we lost some good people for sure, but the people that are there are good, so let's help them do that. So I think the challenge, Jeff, and I think you're going to touch on this probably throughout the day would be my guess is, it just tells me we have to be better at prioritizing.
Yep.
And that's what I think we're going to touch on today. How do we prioritize? And then, can you direct the personnel to line up with the priorities to make sure that is being done and can be implemented. And that's what I think for the partnerships and all the things we'll talk about, we'll kind of focus on.
Right, I'm going to want to focus that.
Yeah.
That'll be my second round of questions, how we actually get there. So, Caitrin, he said hope.
Ooh.
I heard that word, hope. So, you're here representing the environmental NGOs and what they're doing, and I, PPIC, we've got lots of involvement. We watch some of them really get hurt in this because they're carrying on the bulk of the work on restoration, for example, and things like that. So, how are you guys adapting to this, other than not ticking people off?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the hope perspective, and I think I'll join you there maybe later in the panel. But I'm going to start a little bit with some of the impacts the ripple effect impacts to the conservation and environmental community, and the work that we do in partnership with state agencies, with water agencies, with folks across the state. So the changing federal landscape has had impacts, as described, significantly to federal staffing at key federal agencies for environmental and conservation work, like NOAA Fisheries, Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, National Parks. And for TNC, I can speak specifically about some examples of impacts that we've seen. We've seen impacts from the staffing and our ability to monitor and track migratory birds on our preserves and in other places across the state. We've started to see some impacts to stream gauge data that we rely on for our own projects, but we also rely on to develop foundational science that is used by agencies to manage our rivers and our streams. And we're anticipating pretty big impacts to our ability to work in federal lands on our forest management and wildfire risk reduction projects without the federal partnerships there. So we're already seeing some impacts. The question about adapting is, I think we're really truthfully still in a place where we are not seeing yet the full impact of this staffing reduction. I think it's going to come in the future. There's a lot of planning and permitting projects that we rely on our federal partners to help advance. And as Ken and David already described, we don't really know who's going to be working with us on an individual level and within agencies to advance some of those projects. So right now we are in a place where we are navigating the federal impacts and staffing while also navigating a significant reduction in federal funding for conservation work and restoration work. We've seen reductions in grant programs, complete cancellation in grant programs in some instances. And while I have hope, I guess I got there. While I have hope that some of those things will start to kind of materialize again as priorities play out within the current federal administration. For example, there's some funding that was in the former Inflation Reduction Act that's been transitioned to the new Farm Bill that's available for conservation programs. There will be an impact to environmental NGOs and restoration groups' ability to do some of the work they've been planning to do. And I don't want to just flag that this isn't something that's just going to impact ecosystem outcomes. Most of the projects that we undertake are actually multi-benefit projects. They're projects in partnership, like I said, with water agencies or state agencies to not only improve environmental outcomes, but improve water supply reliability, reduce flood risk, reduce sea level rise, and such. So right now, we're adapting by doing our best and kind of trying to prepare for what we think might be coming.
Even though you don't really know what's coming.
Even though we don't totally
and
know
I don't think there's anybody in this room who knows what's coming. But that brings you, Pete. You might, I mean, as a grizzled veteran of more than 4 decades in this business, I think that's right. You presumably have seen it all in all of this, and you've been both a regulator and regulated in all of this. So I'm going to turn it on its head. Mostly, I want to avoid too much whining, and have you say, okay, where do you see an opportunity in what's happening right there? Are there opportunities? Again, using your vast years of experience, do you see an opportunity here? I bet David does.
Yeah, sure. If you indulge me, I'll use an analogy. When I grew up, there was 13 kids, 13 siblings of my parents, and we had to live together. Can you imagine a house of 13, and we saw our parents as the ones that give us the money and the ones that give us the rules. It's like, I feel a little bit that way of what we're going through now, sort of a separation anxiety, I guess, because we have to leave home at some point. But yeah, I mean, I think the federal government is crucial when you think about the Clean Water Act, for example, on the water quality side, the compact and the CVP and how we work together with the federal government. So, you know, we can't, it's the kind of thing where we can't live with them or without them. You know, I think, and that's sort of the dilemma I think that we're going to have to face. And maybe, you know, it's a paradigm shift and maybe there's an opportunity there. You know, how do we step up as a state or states, maybe in the western side of how we address water scarcity and water quality. And I'll talk about it later, but maybe there's something we can work better with the private sector. I mean, I think technology has not been used very well. I think there's a lot of opportunities in technology. How do we get there? How do we incentivize the companies that can give us better bang for our buck, you know, in water use, both on the water quality side and the water supply side? So I think the silver lining is that perhaps out of this is going to force us to think differently, to think more creatively, more, you know, come up to the 20th century, the 21st century we're in. So that's sort of what I see as the opportunity of maybe it's going to force us to think outside the box where we've been somewhat complacent. And if you look at the Colorado River negotiations, they're going, you know, they're not going anywhere. And that's the kind of thing, we got to change that mentality of us against them and how we work better together and the tools that we have now, we can develop. So, and I'll talk more about it later.
Okay, good. But in this case, I want to get to Alison, who really has a pretty complicated job in all of this, basically running the State Water Project. So bring us home on this set of first questions that really we're trying to look at impacts and all of this. And other than my suggestion that you take over the Central Valley Project, I get it in every year, by the way. I get it every year. Other than taking over the Central Valley Project, tell me about what's going on in DWR and the State Water Project as they're thinking about this partner, which is so essential to your day-to-day life, and how to manage that partner and the changes with that partner.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, you know, when it comes down to it, we are seeing that directives from federal agencies are threatening information on data, precipitation, stream flow, weather events, and all of that information is really crucial for protecting Californians from flood, droughts, tsunamis, extreme weather events. And state agencies rely on having information from stream flow and river flow gauges to really inform what our emergency response systems are and how we can plan and warn people early. DWR also uses information collected on the snowpack. The snow melt accounts for about 30% of water in California. And so we rely on our federal partners to collect information on those data to inform, for example, Bulletin 120, which is a forecast of water availability throughout the season. So we're seeing challenges in reductions of staff throughout federal organizations that really, not just DWR, but many state agencies, you know, including CAL FIRE, Cal OES, State Water Resource Control Board, we all rely on this data and information to dictate and inform the best uses of water. Everything from water quality, protection of endangered fish species, our forecasting, our reservoir operations. There's a lot that's inherent into how we work with our federal partners on collecting and gathering this information. You know, DWR and our federal partners, we have a very close working relationship. We share our wall with them in Sacramento at the Flood Operations Center with the California Nevada River Forecasting Center. And so we are working hand in hand every day to look at the river, the weather, the patterns, what's coming to us, and make informed decisions. And so those are the challenges that we're seeing right now on the information that we use in a very tight kind of state and federal partnership, and thinking about how do we put backup systems or redundancies or develop new partnerships and opportunities while still relying on our federal partners, because I think you said it, David, people on the ground are working very hard. They are making things happen throughout these challenges, and they're part of our solution while we think forward on the new opportunities we have, you know, as a state to move through that.
So let me follow up on that a little bit. This is affecting all the western states. It's not just California. Has DWR talked to the other states about opportunities to pool resources? And, you know, I'm thinking about the California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is so vital.
Yes.
in particularly with a Category 4 atmospheric river hitting us this afternoon, just to remind us what it can be like. So are you having any conversations with the
Yeah,
other
there's
states?
coordinations and conversations going on. We are keeping our eye too on any reductions in federal agencies that are happening in other states, so that we understand and are aware of and can, develop a plan together. So I think it's important to recognize that it's not just California, but it is the Western states in general, of like how we're all working together and moving forward throughout these challenges.
And maybe you dodged this. Sorry, I don't mean to pick on you, but maybe you dodged this. You did not mention that three-letter word, Central Valley Project, even though I'm the one who did it at the beginning. That's like, isn't that your day-to-day? Isn't that what you eat for breakfast? Is this what's happening with the Central Valley Project?
Yeah, we're staying on the ground, closely coordinating with our partners. They have been able to successfully work and maintain the positions that are needed for operations and forecasting, and so we are in close coordination with every day. And then the California Nevada River Center, that's a federal agency that you mentioned. They did have some staff reductions, and we were happy to hear that they were granted an emergency preparedness to be able to hire back some of those positions. And so we work with them on a daily basis. We share, like I said, we share a wall with them at our Joint Operations Center in Sacramento. And so we do have to continue to stay coordinated and work together through these challenges.
Okay. So before I move on to the next question, I want to make sure if any of you want to add to this on the things you heard. I mean, I think we have to start thinking about where are the opportunities, right? I mean, so in this, it's easy to just wring our hands, but we've got to move now to where are the opportunities. So I mean, if anybody wants to add anything to that earlier, we'll get to that as we go to the next questions. If nobody's got anything to say, we'll go on to that. Okay, well, actually, let's talk about that gaps. Dave, I was sitting next to David at lunch, and the P word kept coming up all the time, priorities, and how we fill these gaps. And so, Caitrin, I want to start with you, because, I mean, this is a big deal. There's no surprise, year in, year out, we talk about how ecosystems are not doing well in all of this. So for you, where are the priority gaps that really need to be filled in this, and what are you in the NGO world planning to do about it?
Yes, I mean, I think maybe one thing I'll add from what I said before, which will build to my answer, is the staffing reductions and the federal funding reductions that we are seeing are on top of often already underfunded or under-resourced environmental work. Like, this is not I think one of my first PPIC reports was Paying for Water, where we identified environment as one of our fiscal orphans, and that is still the case. So what we have to think about is not only like how to adapt and what our opportunities are, but long-term sustainability and how we can build that. So I'm going to steal from Caitlin. She had 3 things: paying for things, measuring things, and doing things. Okay, I listened.
It was stuff, actually. It was stuff.
Paying for stuff. Things and stuff. So on the paying for things, I'll start with what I think is hopeful in this current moment, which is last November, California's passed Proposition 4, which is the largest climate and water bond in state history. It passed with 60% of the vote, which I think demonstrates in this national political climate, this is a unique thing that California has, which is the support of our citizens and taxpayers to invest in climate resilience, in water management, and in ecosystems. And so I think we have to really take advantage of that opportunity and use Prop 4 funds for the highest and most important priorities that we have across the state. One of the things I think that's important to keep in mind with Prop 4 is there's a lot of demand for it, which I think demonstrates the long-term underfunding of work like this. There's I think about $1 billion in proposals in front of the Wildlife Conservation Board for work right now that they're gonna have to go through and make decisions about. So this money is well needed and will go quickly. Hopefully the state allocates it in a way that it gets out the door, but then it will be out the door and then we'll be back to where we were. So as far as thinking about what we should be doing, I think long-term sustainable funding sources for California in light of the current federal situation, but just from where we were before we started, are really crucial at both the local, state, regional level. And I think that's an important place where partnerships, as my panelists have brought up, are crucial you're not going to get new funding sources without thinking about how to use that money in partnership across needs like floods and infrastructure upgrades and ecosystems. And then the measuring of it all, I think one of the things that we have seen a lot of progress on in California is the way that we measure and manage our water and account for our water, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think this goes to one of the ways that the state can really significantly step up. And one of the things that I think TNC has been working in partnership a lot on in recent years, especially when it comes to managing our streams and our rivers and making decisions about what we need to maintain over time, especially when it comes to thinking about times of scarcity. So one small example is that we have been working in partnership with the State Board, Wildlife Conservation Board, and other partners on a small water availability tool for our North Coast rivers, which is a way that we can access information about what water is available in real time for when people are applying for permits to change their water use in a way that is better for them and better for the river. In the past, that lack of information on that has led to sometimes projects taking like 8 to 10 years to get permitted. Yep. And that lack of information has led to major delays in investments in some of our rural communities and rivers that would have us much better prepared right now, not only for uncertainty, climate uncertainty, but other uncertainty. So those sort of investments, I think the state should continue to make, both at local and regional levels, but also statewide. And incorporating those local models into statewide decision making. And then the doing stuff of it all, following my list, the doing stuff of it all, and back to the way we spend Prop 4, is I think we have an obligation to demonstrate how to spend public investment in a way that is effective and efficient. Like I said, it's unique that Californians gave us all this money to spend, and so we should do it well. And one of the ways we can do it better is by making sure that what we are spending the money on is done as efficiently as possible. So the state's been making advance in what they call cutting the green tape, so efforts to make it easier to permit projects that have environmental benefits. And I think there's more that can be done in that area, and there's more that can be done specifically using Prop 4 funds when it comes to drought planning or habitat incentive programs that would benefit from more efficient permitting and decision making and transparent priority setting.
Cool. Great.
I think that's all I have to say.
That was a lot. And, you know, I had a follow-up question, which is just a fun one. And
okay.
Like, is there anything really exciting that happened this year that you're really thrilled about on the environment side? Because usually we're just whining.
Oh yeah, I was going to save it for the end, but you.
Okay,
I
fine.
can
Save it for the end because I got about half a dozen of them, so it's fine. We'll
I mean, I can just say to that point on the North Coast, and where we've been working a lot on improving stream flows and habitat restoration. This year we saw for the second time record coho return numbers, salmon return numbers on the Mendocino coast. And that's a demonstration of long-term commitment to a place and partnership across that region with communities, water agencies, counties. And so it's really exciting, and it's that kind of work that we should build on with investments like Prop 4, so that Californians can see that their public investment is working and that we're improving conditions for communities and ecosystems.
And that was the precise example I was thinking
Oh,
of.
great.
So that's great.
Yes,
What a
it's
great
very
coho
exciting.
run it was this year. For all you people who love to eat coho, it was a great year. So that's good. So Cannon, so back to you. You painted grim is too strong a word, but you know, it's an unfortunate picture of what's going on within the federal government. And I want to know what you think, from your view, if you were in charge, how do we fill in those gaps, since they're not coming back real fast? So what do you think we, and I use that in the broader we, should do about filling in those gaps, particularly in your part of the valley?
Yeah, I mean, I would think I started a little negative there, but you know,
with reason.
The important thing to remember, and I think David highlighted it, was, you know, we've been through these challenges before. We're going to be through different administrations. I see a lot of young faces out there, so I just want you to know, like, there's a lot of core people working in California water that are very, very competent and motivated people. We've got a great environmental community with a lot of people who are dedicated and very constructive. I think the ag community, for the most part, is very constructive and wanting to work on solutions. I think you can look no further than Sigma implementation. People got together, got their plans in. You know, it hasn't been perfect, but it's been coordinated. The water user agency community is very motivated. So you have this core underlying fabric of California water that are working to advance solutions all the time, and that work is continuing. I think in the vein of not wasting, a crisis or a challenge, we certainly want to continue to stay very motivated and connected, but I think this gives us an opportunity to become more connected and look for those opportunities where we can support each other. I know the San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority, we're stepping in at times to help, operations make sure that they happen and lending expertise there. I think we all have, these different ways that we can work together. There's collaborative action groups that are working together in the valley and trying to, broaden those networks. So I think the times of these stresses are the times when the core group who are working kind of behind the scenes and not getting all the fancy headlines, there's still a lot of opportunity for connectivity. I think we can do better work, on the science and data collection. All those things are opportunities, and I think the water user communities can fund a lot of that activity regardless of the federal government. Obviously, it helps to have alignment between the state and the federal governments, and I think we will always, you see these administration changes can pull us out of alignment. I think we're particularly out of alignment in some ways right now, but we've got opportunities to have the water core community, and I think from the South Valley CVP users, we also have to keep continuing to have the courage to articulate our priorities to an administration that in some ways is a little scary to say something negative about, because there can be some serious repercussions, but I think there's a courage aspect of staying the course and not turning against each other and continuing to move forward, because
Ken, I want to follow up on that. So get out your crystal ball for a second. Is it possible we're beginning Pete was talking about this, so all of you alluded to it, we're beginning an era where there's just going to be less federal government, and it's going to be more carried on by California and locals. So those roles, when you think about people talking in the valley, once we get through the sky is falling discussions, are we now seeing, look, we're going to start taking over some of this stuff that they used to do before?
I think our agency took over the management of a lot of the CVP infrastructure in the 90s. I think people are still going to look for opportunities. As I said in my opening comments, I think trying to rebuild these agencies is going to take a lot of time. And so we have to find ways to step in. We have to find ways to find different funding streams. There's really going to be no choice for, I think, even if there was a different administration, it's not going to be easy to kind of put all the pieces back together so quickly. But again, I think we've got a competent group of folks that's going to work very hard to figure out how to make the best out of kind of a challenging situation.
That's just the underlying theme here we're starting to talk about. Adaptation may mean less federal government over the long term. It's a difficult discussion to have. So speaking of you, Alison, you and your complex relationship with your federal partners, you manage both floods and water supply. You have to because you have a very, very large reservoir that everybody looks at. So, I've said this before, but I want to tee off of what Ken had said. What can you tell us? I realize there's limits to what you can tell us. Is your agency thinking about the aspects of federal government that you will start to absorb and think about in the long term that you're going to be in charge of? And of course, it's the Central Valley Project, my favorite, my favorite bugaboo when it comes to that. But go ahead.
Yeah, so, California, we do have contractual, technical, and administrative options for keeping the flow of data and information available to us. We do rely heavily and work with our federal partners, but we are developing, some backup plans and redundancies in place so that we make sure that we have the information that we need for forecasting and operations. So we rely a lot on our longstanding relationship with the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, the CW3E. So they are really working with us to help us fill in some of the potential gaps that are there. And one of the things that they're doing for DWR right now is helping to develop a forecast model that would sit in-house within DWR.
Great.
So that is being done in combination with both our state and federal partners. So we are still doing that with the California and Nevada River Forecasting Center. But that is like one effort. We're going to have kind of test runs that are going on this year to provide backup and redundancy of that. Again, it still is relying on our federal partners. Another thing that we've done is we are working with the California Conservation Corps to do some of the forest management that needs to be done before the winter season. This is particularly something that federal agencies have done on our behalf, but we're utilizing that state resource to manage and make sure that our snow course measurements are ready for snow inundation this season, and that there'll be easy access, that there'll be communication, data will be collected and maintained. So I think it really is starting to work on, we do have these complex relationships, but we can start to rely on our state and federal, or our local and state partnerships to develop some redundancies in place, to put some practices. And it is going to be, it's going to take some time, but it is an opportunity. And I think this, even today, is like a great place to start with a discussion of highlighting the data that we need, how we use it, and the importance of it is. So this is a great opportunity to raise state awareness about the information that's needed, how it informs the decisions, not just for our forecasting, but for the protection of Californians as a whole.
I mean, that's an opportunity in a way, because we don't go through a reset like this every now and then. We just build priorities. We don't actually choose our priorities. Which, David, I want to come to you and your vast experience in trying to set priorities and manage priorities, and how do you get there? Because everybody seems to have different priorities, and of all the people I know at the stage, you've done this for many years in trying to herd the cats in the Sacramento Valley and do that. So if there's a takeaway secret for others who are involved in this, what's your secret sauce?
Well, I don't know if there's any secret sauce. I will just say I am blessed to work with a lot of really good managers and technical consultants and attorneys, and it does take a whole team. I think let's just acknowledge that, and that is emerging from the local areas. So for the Sac River Basin, let's just start in the headwaters. Amazing work going on in the headwaters. Alison just touched on that. I think of a couple of examples, Yuba Water Agency, Placer County Water Agency, making major investments in the watershed. We've had fires literally circle the Sacramento River Basin over the last decade. I think you've heard about every single one of them. They've been devastating. So there's now, I think, some really good work being done in the headwaters for the whole entire state of California. To both improve the forest management, to improve the water quality, and I think, again, that's a partnership. Nature Conservancy has been very active in that space. So I think, kind of start at the ridge top. I think there's a lot of good work done. We're going to have to fill the gap that the Forest Service is probably not going to be able to be as strong a partner as it has been in the past, but I think you've got local and the state partners that I think can help kind of support that. Go down the system a little bit further, go to the lower part of the system, floodplains. Probably the most exciting work going on in the state, if you ask me. And Jeff, you've been a big part of this in your career. Floodplain reactivation, just an amazing partnership of local agencies coming together with conservation partners. The state and federal agencies, 10 state and federal agencies came together last year, signed an MOU for Floodplain Forward to really focus on that. We know that there's going to be a challenge there in getting funding for that, but you now have this partnership in place where you can be nimble. You can kind of focus on lots of different areas. You don't become so dependent on one entity to get that done. And so I think that's a good example of a collaboration. In the middle of the system, you have things like Sites Reservoir that just has an incredible amount of momentum, right? Just a big off-stream regulating reservoir. And its time has come, and it's a new type of project, right? Water for the environment, water for cities, farms. There's going to be some big investment choices made there, but again, I think the federal and state agencies have been amazing partners in that, but locals are stepping forward all the way from Southern California to Northern California to make that work. And I think you've got these collaborations that I think insulate you in some ways from the kind of the reverberations of a changing administration, and I think that really builds. And then the final piece I'll just mention, the Bay Delta has always been kind of a quagmire in politics, and we probably don't want to talk about that too much today, but we are doing this amazing program called the Healthy Rivers and Landscape Program, right? An innovative new way to approach the Delta. Folks are working on this from throughout the state of California. It's an unprecedented collaboration of folks that have come together to try something different and say, what we've been doing the last 50 years hasn't helped fish and wildlife, hasn't helped water supply reliability for Cannon, for the state project. Shouldn't we try something different? And that's what this something different is. Whether this is going to be great or not, time will tell. We have a science program built into it. We have a monitoring program built into it. We'll learn. And if we're doing things great, keep going. If we find out that what we're doing doesn't make any sense, then hopefully we'll change course and try something different again. But I think those are just kind of 4 examples of kind of local collaborations or statewide collaborations in that case, where people are really working together. And I think we can just insulate ourselves against changes that are going to be coming, over the next decade. Right now it's the federal government, could be the state government in 3 years, could be some financial crisis or recession or something in 5 years. I mean, we just don't know. So we're going to be prepared, I think, for all of those circumstances.
So let me take take away a message that you and Cannon have both been giving, and Caitrin too, in particular, and for that matter, Pete. Not you, Alison, but you're in the thick of things. And that is, don't get rattled by the current chaos. Stay the course. I mean, Cannon, you alluded to it earlier. We all heard lots of stories about now that we have this change in federal government, we're going to get all the water we want in the San Joaquin Valley and to heck with everybody else, which doesn't sound like that's playing out. And you would probably have been the first to tell them that it's not. I mean, so if you had to give advice to people who are thinking about what happens you have given your advice. I mean, but I want you to repeat your advice to people, and actually you 3 in particular, about how you deal with big changes like this. And in fact, you first, Caitrin. I mean, from the environmental community, do we panic? Does our hair catch fire?
No. I think we're all saying the same thing, and I try not to give advice that I don't follow myself. So if I was to give advice...
I worked with you for years, and you were always giving me advice.
That I followed. You should have listened. Okay. So in personal times of chaos or uncertainty, the things I try to remember are, what are my values, and what are the things that are going to actually matter in the long term? And I think those are the 2 questions we should be asking ourselves in California. From the environmental perspective, I think we have a lot of examples of what California values from our natural ecosystems and from our natural resources. We have environmental laws like the California Endangered Species Act and the California Clean Water Act that help us navigate changes in federal circumstances because we have our own values that we've articulated. So try to maintain and protect those over time, and then focus on what you want in the long term. And I was going to use the Coho example, but I will use another amazing example, which is the Klamath Dam removal, which, speaking of navigating many changes in federal and state administration, was a project that, through tribal leadership, folks kept their eye on the prize for a very, very, very long time. And now we're seeing incredible outcomes for that river and the communities out there because of that persistence. So I would maintain our focus in that way.
So David, you must be telling your community the same thing.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? I mean, again, it's these partnerships, and they're enduring, right? I think that's what we're all trying to build. And at least I don't remember a time, I'd be curious what others think, where there's been more unification around more things in California water than I ever remember. I mean, again, the acrimony is always what shows up in the newspaper. We all know that. Yeah. But there's, to me, much less acrimony and much more collaboration going on. So I think that's the future here.
Cannon, is that what's going on?
Yeah, I think we have to keep in mind that the durable solutions in California water are going to be the ones that involve multiple stakeholders. I mean, what we're seeing, this rah-rah, we're going to bang everybody over the head and take the water, and that's not going to last in California. And I think, it's incumbent upon all of us really now with a new governor coming in. One action I think we all need to be thinking about is, how do we present day one a unified front and a unified set of priorities that are more than just like what are the ag priorities, but what are the folks on this stage. It would behoove us all to think about that and to have something ready to talk about and to give actual something over to give priorities, and hopefully have somebody who's not as interested in trolling the current administration. It's like let's stop some of this stuff and not get to the lowest level. Let's try to keep the eye on the future prize, because we've got a state that's worth fighting for, and we've got it's a multiple. Every part of the state that makes it unique is something that we need to try to preserve, and so I think that's what we have to focus. This too shall pass. We'll get past this, but we have a lot to work on in the meantime to continue to have this be the state that we love, as California.
Well said, by the way. Pete, I'm going to, just as a slight tangent, but it's related to this discussion. You live in the southern part of the state, and you are bordered by the Colorado River states. You consume Colorado River water, and then you are bordered to the south by Mexico. And Mexico often gets forgotten, except when we talk about the Tijuana River. And stuff. So, I mean, I want to hear your perspective from the south about how we're viewing our neighbors in all of this, and why and I mean, I want to hear your input is how that's working in the current environment. How well are we doing?
You want me to be honest?
Yeah, please be honest. Don't lie to me.
We're going through a very interesting situation right now, just given our interaction with the federal government. But you can imagine it even at a higher level with the Mexican government. There's been discussions about on the Colorado River, especially, that it's obvious that there has to be discussions and negotiations with Mexico. However, everybody understands that it can't be done until we have our stuff together on the U.S. side before we approach Mexico. So it's an interesting dilemma. One of the things that everybody's concerned about is, okay, what if everything falls through? We don't have an agreement in the basin states. What happens with Mexico? I think it may benefit Mexico, because Mexico could say, well, you don't have an agreement on the U.S. side. You have to live up to your agreement with us on the Mexican side. But besides all that, I think we've had a really great history of collaboration with Mexico. We've done Minute 319, 320, 323, and 330, where we've worked with Mexico to invest U.S. funds in their ag system for efficiency and that kind of thing. I think that'll continue. I think the question in Mexico is the same one it is here. They're running out of water. They're looking at desal in Tijuana, which a lot of people don't like because it's going to exacerbate the sanitation issue. So I go back to the same. I mean, it's the same thing that's happening here. How do you live within your means at the state level in Baja? And so how do you develop your own water supply? Because Mexico's realizing that Colorado is limited and it's probably going to keep going down. And so they're facing the same situation we are. And so what we're trying to do at both the water side and the sanitation side is helping Mexico with technology, with institutional capacity. And I want to get back to that, because I think on the U.S. side, here in California, we have to do the same thing. I think it's three things: innovation, regulation, and privatization. I don't think we've done as much as we can on the innovation side. I think there's so many smart people in California, Silicon Valley, and a lot of great thinkers, and we haven't been able, in my view, to take advantage of that to help all of the industries, farming, the municipal sector, quite frankly, could do better. And so how do we look at regulations to incentivize the private sector to bring money to the table? Perhaps develop markets for if we recycle and reuse water better and make a market for it, maybe that'll help us also on the water supply side. So I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot to do in that area. I don't know how we get there. Maybe that's part of the thinking process. How do we do stuff? How do we incentivize folks to innovate and to invest, quite frankly. So. But to get to your point, I think we're having the same issues. The same thing is happening in Mexico. And again, we're working with them very closely on this.
And you're at real risk on what happens in Colorado as well. I think that most Californians don't pay enough attention to that.
Right.
But this is a big deal.
No, it is a big deal.
And as the latest news shows us, they're not making all threat. I don't know at this point. We'll see what happens. But that's going to be a major issue, and we'll see. And maybe we'll cover it in next year's. Hey, so I want to move on to sort of do some future thinking here. And we're going to have a change in administration here in California, and we don't know who the next governor is going to be. We don't know who he or she is what their priorities are going to be. But I want you to start writing, as we sit here, their water platform. What should the next governor be focused on in their water platform? And I'll put you on the spot first, Alison, because you're not allowed to do that. You're a state employee. I'm sure no one is watching on the internet. But in fact, you're now dealing with a hypothetical governor rather than the real governor, so you're really not going to get in trouble. So I want to hear what your priorities would be. And again, in the background sits a changing relationship with the federal government. I mean, that's what I want you to couch it in, that we're going to be relying less on the federal government. I think that change is real, it's here. What are we going to do? So, Alison, you get to write the policy for the next governor. What's it going to be? What do you want to tell him?
I think it's really focused on building the partnerships that we have and raising state awareness to protect and maintain the information that we need for our, forecasting and emergency response system. So it's really focusing on those data resources, identifying the partnerships, building those together, and again, raising awareness from Northern California all the way to Southern California. David, you mentioned there's a lot going on in water right now, and it is a time where we're all coming together. And so let's really use this opportunity to leverage that to raise the state awareness and to get, our whole state involved in supporting our water policy issues. And I think, again, that's really focused on our forecasting, our emergencies response, and how we're operating the system for benefits of not just our water supplies, but the environmental benefits are a really important point that Caitrin has been brought up many times.
So pretend I'm the governor for a moment, and oh, that would be a disaster. Okay, no, Caitrin's looking like, oh no, that is so not. Oh, thank you. Wow. I will not serve in my administration.
He didn't listen to you before. Why would
So, Alison, I want to come back to you and say, okay, now I'm the governor, and I'm talking to you. That's all nice. You want to do what Katie wants us to do, which is the measure stuff. But we have to do stuff. And I remind you that the federal government is the flood control agency for the entire country, whether it's the National Flood Insurance Program, whether it's FEMA, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the principal planning and does a lot of the emergency response. So what do you do? What do you tell the governor to do there?
I think that we need to maintain those conversations. Again, highlighting the importance of why we need this information and how we're utilizing this. But yeah, we need to bring state resources internally to develop the redundancies or practices in place so we have those. So I think that we have to keep the door open and work with our federal partners and understand how we can work together as a united front while also supporting and directing resources to California to measure things, to do things, the fun things.
Meeting is a tough one for the governor, and knowing people who run for office. So next person, David, I want to jump to you. We're in a period of actually this is for both you and for Canada. We're a period of transition in agriculture, much more for the San Joaquin Valley than it is for the Sacramento Valley. But I want to hear what you would tell this new governor, what their policy should be, and how they should think about their agricultural policies, particularly as it pertains to the Sacramento Valley, again with this background of a changing federal presence in California. What would you say?
Yeah, good question. So when you're governor, we would, that's where we're starting?
We're hosed.
Wow. I got a lot of nervous people in the audience. Just saying. No, it's a great question. Well, I mean, I think the first thing, and it probably sounds a little cliche, but we need to have alignment of the state and federal agencies. Let's, again, just be honest. During the Great Depression, we could not fund a water project in the state of California. We invited the federal government to come to California and build a water project. We now have to make that work. That state-federal alignment that Alison and everybody else has talked about, we have to make that work. And, water's not partisan. People are partisan, but water's not partisan. Water, it's geographic to a certain degree, but we just need to work through that. So I think it kind of goes without saying we need to align. And again, I think this kind of vision that we have in the Sacramento River Basin, at least, is this idea of kind of a riverscape, right? It's not just a focus on a little river or creek sliver, but it's that riverscape, the landscape. And I think there's an opportunity kind of from the ridgetop again to the river mouth, that's going to be my theme, to kind of let's get people working in unison to do that. And if you have the locals working together, I think you can bring the state and federal agencies together to work on that, and you can hopefully avoid a lot of the acrimony. I think the other thing we can advise a governor is the IOP, the Interim Operations Plan, was a disaster for California. That's what we know doesn't work. I think everybody should agree on that. It didn't work well for anybody. And that's what happens when we don't work together, right? And 2022 was a disaster for California in most places. Let's just remember that, and let's never do that again. And that means we have to convince the state and federal administrations, at any given time, they have to work together. And that takes local leadership, though. I think that only comes because the local leadership can empower them to do that.
Ken, I want to come to you, and I alluded to the beginning. We try not to talk about it. There's things we don't talk about in the room, but we're PPIC, so we talk about it, right? And we are seeing a time of extraordinary change in agriculture, and that is throughout the West. That's not just in California, where we are realigning agriculture to something else, and its future is different. And what we did in the past is not necessarily going to continue. So you are going to be the chief advisor to this new governor, and you're going to have this governor.
Secretary of Ag.
You're going to explain to this governor that this is agriculture. It is the most productive agricultural region in the country. It uses a lot of water, and there's less water available for it, and we're looking at some major transitions. How would you advise this new governor on that? And again, keeping in back in your mind, the federal government, the changes in the federal government, and how that shapes what you advise.
First, I'll say we all participated in some ag water use today, so thanks. Somebody brought that food to our tables that came from a farm somewhere, so I think we should acknowledge that, but I don't want to go back on the ag thing, water too much. But I've been fortunate to actually host a number of candidates running for governor on the farm recently over the last few months, and I think before I would start pitching policy, I would really say, get educated, make water a priority. These folks are intelligent folks who've come from a lot of them long service in California. The knowledge gap about water, I mean, your level of knowledge, I would feel more comfortable with you in the water position.
That's sad.
And it's not, and that being said, it's not easy. I mean, these are people who are, but when you try to talk about the nuances of pre-1914 water rights and Friant rights versus, CBP operations and ESA and CESA and all these different acronyms and aspects. I mean, you see these people get out of their depths pretty quickly. I mean, I would think we want to have almost like a educational onboarding system about California water somehow for these folks before they can even articulate policy. I think, the problem is they're going to be, if anybody can bend their ear and change direction because they don't have the knowledge base to understand how complex the system is, I think it's very hard for somebody to really be a strong leader on water unless you can expand. I'd say they have to take every Water Education Foundation tour. They have to, spend time, focusing on a lot of these things that are critical educational elements. Build a trusted network of people who aren't just telling you the same thing. Get it. So policy-wise, ag's going to continue. Sigma's going to force contraction in agriculture. We're going to just see that. Everybody sort of knows that. I think the outcomes that we need to have are going to be stitched together by the best in the Central Valley is going to come from working with the environmental groups who want to do the repurposing of the land and not just have it either all be solar or dust clouds. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts things we can talk about, but from that larger level, I just think our leadership in California has got to make water a priority. We've got to understand our population has increased so much, and I know people don't like above ground storage or even talking about it, but I think also with knowledge, I guess would say as a final piece, knowledge comes the ability to be the adult in the room, and I think that's sometimes what I really admired about Senator Feinstein was there was times she would close the door and put people together and say, you're not leaving. And I think sometimes we got to have more of that adult in the room who's going to say, look, I hear what you're saying, you're not being constructive, we're going to drive to a solution. Maybe it's not going to be everybody happy, but this is what we've got to do. And I think, we're incumbent on all of us to elect somebody like that, and then once we get that person in place to, armor them with the knowledge to make the hard decisions. So,
I'm proud to say Dianne Feinstein yelled at me and said, "God damn it, Dr. Mount, you are not running for office. Tell me what you think." I must have told you that story. It's a great story. I was being yelled at. So, Grizzled Pete, I want you to represent for a moment the 97% GDP of California's economy, which is in the cities, and particularly in Southern California, which is the behemoth in all this. I want you to represent what you would tell a new governor about water in Southern California, the most important things they need to know at this time as they get ready for running for election and running this stuff.
No, I think, well, for Southern California, it's a little bit easier, I think, than statewide. I mean, you're going to focus on Southern California, but I think it goes back to a couple of things. One is accounting for water. You know, where is it? How much do we have, and what are we missing? And also acknowledging where we're going to have shortfalls. Obviously, the Colorado River, you know, good education on Colorado, because that's going to impact the state. And then after you have that information is, okay, I know this gets overused, sustainability. You know, how do you make investments to meet those shortfalls? And a lot of it's going to now, from what I've seen in the lack of federal investment, it's going to have to be localized. You know, how do you incentivize local folks to do their own projects? Maybe groundwater, brackish water desalting, like recycling and reuse, that kind of thing. That's going to have to be localized, because I think we're going to have to get away, and I think we have gotten away from, you know, importation. Because you look at, again, the Colorado River, and you look at the Bay Delta, I mean, those are pretty iffy propositions for the long term. And so I think my advice for governor is, again, kind of accounting and where are the shortfalls and how do you address them. Be very clear about it, and try to set some priorities and goals. And one last thing, very minor thing, is I would encourage the governor also to visit Baja California once in a while. You know, we haven't had that interaction with Mexico in a long time. Probably Schwarzenegger was the last governor that really did that reached out. And that pays dividends, I think, in the long term. It doesn't seem like it, but it does pay dividends. And I would also encourage the new governor to reach out to Mexico and make that connection. But
Yeah, our border. Okay, so because you were my friend, I chose you last on that question.
Oh, I didn't know if I'd get to answer because I was mean to you.
No, you have to answer it. So, okay, new governor, we need an environmental program. What we're doing is not working. And, well, except it is. I mean, I want to say the North Coast was just such a bright light this year, the coho returns. And by the way, there were 40,000 salmon in Battle Creek this year. I mean, which is extraordinary. So, which helps that we had 3 wet years. That really does help.
That's where I'm going to go.
Okay, so tell me what you're going to tell this governor.
Well, I think I agree with all of the panelists, and I think the only thing I would add is that hopefully we will not be in a devastating drought when the governor starts their term, but it will be a high likelihood that if they serve 2 terms over 8 years, we will experience, if not 1, 2, or 3 years of maybe more of drought. And so we will have the public's attention then to do some of the things that I think we all really care about. I was just reading the blog from PPIC with Devin from Metropolitan talking about the change in public opinion when it comes to local water supply investments. During the drought, they wanted them to spend a lot of money on recycled water, and now they're asking what they're doing. So I think what I would say to the new governor is to think about priorities and planning with that moment in mind, when we will have an opportunity with the support of Californians to make some big either investments or changes in the way that we manage and operate water. And from the environmental perspective, it's the same thing. Drought is one of the most significant challenges that freshwater ecosystems face, water scarcity specifically. And most of California rivers, if we're talking just about rivers, have no flow protections in them for regular years or drought years. And those have major, major impacts on species recovery. And you already said it, one of the reasons we're seeing some of the good salmon returns is we haven't had a dry year in a while. And we're going to have it again, and not being prepared for that will just put us back into the same cycle and put us back into a position where we're spending a lot of public money on recovery, but then we're not preparing for the moments that are actually the most impactful to the species. So I would tell them, get ready for the drought.
Yeah, no, why waste a good crisis, right? And because that's one thing we know is going to come. By the way, the last time this happened, this 3-year wet period, does anybody remember when this was? You're too young. It's in the 90s, yeah, it was late 90s. It was the last time we had 3 wet years like this, which is extremely unusual. And they're not even all that wet except for one of them. Okay, final lightning round. This is it. You got 3 minutes. I want to hear priority number 1 for what we do about the federal government. What's the top of your, you don't get
For the federal government?
On the federal side, what's the priority, most efficient thing we can do for dealing with with the changing partnership? Just one. You get 25 words.
I feel like I gave you guys all my ideas.
All right, then say them again.
The number 1 would be to find ways for state, regional, and local agencies to fund and prioritize their own projects.
I believe we really do need to ask for full funding for the National Weather Service. They remain partners and closely coordinated while we work on, strengthening our partnerships in California.
Engage with local and regional partnerships and help empower them.
Great.
Yeah, it's got to be the continued coordination between the partners that already exist, just strengthen it and keep moving the projects forward that we have.
Pete.
Yeah, I think if this continues, it's a new paradigm. I think we have to look at regulation, deregulation, or some form of change in the regulations, because we're not going to be able to get there if we have the federal regulations on top of ours and we don't have staffing, to meet the federal permitting. It's going to be a challenge. And so I think that should be a priority for the federal administration also, if it's going to continue this way. If it's the new way to do things, it's not going to work long term without some relief or some change in how we administer the regulations. So that'll be mine.
Okay, that was great fodder for a series of questions we're going to have now, which comes from the audience rather than me badgering you for the last hour. So we'd like to hear from the audience, and the way we've set this up, and of course I'm 1 minute early, so everybody's scrambling right now, which is very uncharacteristic. We're going to set up, we want to hear from you, including you high school students. We really do want to hear from you. So you will have the most interesting questions. So a reminder for those of you here in Sacramento, if you raise your hand, you will need to raise your hand, and somebody from PPIC will come up with a microphone, but they won't let you hold it. We've learned that, Celeste Cantu. We've learned that, we have learned that over the years. You don't get to hold a microphone. So we will come to you with that and ask questions. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, and we've got a lot, according to my sources, online, remember, you're writing to ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And Sarah Bardeen, who's sitting over here at table 2, will be the one who curates those questions. So who's first? Our advisory council member, Celeste Cantu, former.
So I've heard all of you say historically, and I think many people in this room also share the sentiment that, and Lester Snow used to always say it the best, we have 19th century laws, 20th century institutions, and 21st century problems, and our 19th and 20th century institutions and laws do not give us the basis to solve the challenges we have before us. So it seems to me this is an opportunity to start anew, to completely say, forget about trying to recreate what the feds are no longer able to deliver, or to shore up what they're not doing and have us do it or other people do it, but rather start afresh and say, if we were starting from scratch, what would Powell do? What would we do? And I heard a lot that I love, the idea of looking to the regional, I would like to say, a large watershed basis as the unit for organization of water. But I'd like to, if you had a chance to create from scratch, what would you do?
Oh, this is a good question. Pete.
I mean, if we're starting from scratch, I would have a Department of Water statewide, bring all of DWR, State Board, even parts of Fish and Game together, because we still have the silos. I mean, not that it's not working perfectly, but I mean, I think that would help. If it's a wish, that's what I would do. Have actually a Department of Water where you have everything under one office. You have the water rights, you have funding, you have fisheries. I mean, I think that would help. It's not a panacea, but it may create more problems. But I mean, if you're asking, that's what I would do. But.
Ken, I gotta believe you've got an opinion on this.
I mean, I guess I have a hard time because it's not something that's going to happen, I guess. So it's kind of hard to think of like what we're. Well, I mean, I think one example would be like we're sort of at the cusp of thinking about more adaptive management with the Delta and operations. But you can't operate adaptively if you don't have the humans, So like right now, the state actually is sort of skewing to more being open to looking at that procedure and how that might work. But if you don't have the people in place to pull the levers and make it work, you're going to stick with the calendar-based approach. So, I mean, there's just some fundamental pieces that are like, we're not going to get away right now anytime soon from the federal system working in, having to work in concert with the state system. So I guess it's, how do we make that work as best it can? And I think we're just at an unfortunate period where that's more challenging because the water users can take over some infrastructure, but we can't take over like allocations and actually the water shifting where it's going to go. I mean, that can't go to the water user community. It has to stay in a governmental aspect. And so, again, I think we're just in a tough time to actually implement some of the things that actually could have a lot better outcomes from a water perspective and from an environmental perspective, because they take human capital to make a lot of that. Adaptiveness takes, calendar is easy, you set a date and you turn it off. Adaptive is action, and we just don't have the full complement.
Adaptive management is like the weather. Everybody talks about it, nobody does anything about it. I mean, we say it all the time, but really, hardly anybody's doing it. Any of you want to add on to that before we go to the next question? Okay, good. Where's the next question? There we are. Pointing over there somewhere. We're blinded up here, so we can't really see. So just start talking, whoever you are.
Adding on to the future governor question, what, if any, recommendations would you make for regulating AI data center water use?
So what recommendations would you make for regulating AI in what? Ooh. You're the youngest.
That's an assumption.
So this is a question, by the way, we're grappling with in-house, right, as we speak right now, how AI will change so much of what we're doing in water. So I'd love to hear thoughts on that.
Well, I think this kind of goes back to what we've talked about a lot, which is AI right now, and both from the energy and the water side, is getting a lot of attention because that is the newest technology and everyone's paying attention to it. If we go back through the history of California, we could probably come up with a lot of examples, similar examples of where there was either a new crop or a new technology or a growing city that had a similar thing, that it was getting a lot of attention. So my opinion on something like that is to instead focus on the very specific use. Instead, think about how you're managing the system collectively and how that water use is impacting that, or how you can think about something like, for example, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which creates baselines for water use. And then within those baselines and within those geographies, different technologies or land uses can kind of come and go as needed, but you're maintaining that baseline. I don't know if it would be in the benefit of Californians or the economy that we just start playing whack-a-mole for every single high water use. Instead, we should be setting baselines and sustainability goals that we can manage and plan our communities around.
I should challenge them with the threat of regulation, and you could say, look, if you don't solve, because I think there's a ton of potential for AI to solve a lot of California water issues and be used for very demonstrable good, because we've got so many disparate data sets. I think if you tell those companies, look, hey, regulation's coming your way, but you can get out of the way if you can demonstrate savings of water by investing your time in solving some of our water situation. So maybe we can use the lever of the carrot and the stick. We could get some products made for California water, which are going to take huge investments, but I think AI can be a transformative thing in California to the positive, but maybe these folks need to be incentivized to contribute that to us.
And just to add to that, a lot of these are California companies, right? And so let's get them focused on and wanting to move towards the same long-term future for California that we have, and get them helping to pay for it, or working on policies for it, as opposed to just targeting their specific water use.
David, you want to say something?
Yeah, Jeff, I guess first, since you're going to be governor, I think let's first just be real honest that AI right now is propping up our economy, and your NVIDIA stock particularly is kind of what's keeping our economy even close to
boat, right
balance.
Out of there,
So let's just be honest, that's a super high priority issue for this state. So let's just be super honest about that. I think as far as the water use, I'm not an expert on that. I'll defer to others on the water use dynamic. Obviously, it's a beneficial use of water, and let's find a way to make sure that we can support that in a responsible way. And then as far as, the technology itself, I mean, man, let's embrace it. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? For those who use it, it's phenomenal. Let's use it, and let's use it, again, responsibly. But I think we just need to, let's start with the economic input that it is providing right now, and I think our governors are very thankful for it right now.
Yeah, Silicon Valley uses a lot of water. So it's a throughput. That's what it takes. What's the next question is pointing over there. High school.
Given rising costs and the current state of our federal government, what are the most effective strategies in policy or collaboration efforts between local, state, and federal partners in ensuring water affordability and sustainability for all communities in California?
Okay, that's a really good question. So let's actually, one thing we have not, thank you, that's a great question. We have not talked about the affordability question here, and each of us have been talking about wanting to do more without really focusing on how to pay for it and who gets hurt in the pay for it. I guess we talked about it a little bit. I'd like to hear what you all have to say about that.
Well, we have, in the Central Valley, obviously we have a lot of disadvantaged communities, and I would say our members, outside of any federal funding, our water user community has stepped up quite a bit to help with the knowledge gaps and the funding gaps that are associated with those communities. So I am proud of what, I don't think California agriculture maybe has a perfect track record in our long-term history on dealing with a lot of disadvantaged community water issues, but in the last decade, I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think people are all engaged to support a lot of these small systems that need, the expertise that we already have on staff, the funding that we can come up with. So, that's become a big priority. So, again, those are the projects that give me a lot of hope, is seeing the the responsiveness and the responsibility that's been demonstrated by the water user community to address a lot of that inequity that we see.
In its earlier incarnation, the Bureau of Reclamation was actually quite interested in this and was spending some funding, as was USDA in this. Can you wear both your Metropolitan Water District hat as well as the State Water Project?
Yeah, kind of adding on to that, I think it's this idea of the local state partnerships, and that, raising awareness and education of kind of the water and how we're using it and who needs it and why, like inviting people out to see the farms and what you're doing there, inviting people to disadvantaged communities in Southern California to see their struggles, inviting people to the northern part of the state to see like the strong salmon returns. It's bringing an awareness of kind of what our needs are and having regular conversations and transparent conversations like this are what are the things that we need and how can we brainstorm together. And Ken, you kind of mentioned like the locals and bringing their expertise and knowledge, and I think that we can go even further to be incorporating traditional ecological knowledge into that too, into bringing that into our practices, developing those partnerships and how we manage our systems. And really there are people that on the ground who have information that can be used to help inform policies and decisions. And so like, as a state, I think we're getting better at developing these partnerships and maintaining those and moving these through time, but really strengthening those and relying on one another to think of what are the ways that we can tackle this, and then how are we going to address the affordability piece, collectively.
One other thing I think there's also just for the agricultural users, we're paying a lot to keep the system going and upgrading, and there's a lot of things that go along with having a stable supply of water, and for agriculture in terms of affordability of food and a lot of these things. So we're facing some crises because we have an aging system and we've got a lot of investment that need to be made, and it can't only go onto the backs of the farmers who have to pay the rates for the water. So I think we need to think collectively as a state. Some agriculture is going to contract, like I said. I think there's going to be a shrinking, but we need to make some investments in the infrastructure that we have that is the backbone of the state and that allows us to have the bounty that we have often, and also provide some level of stability in water pricing for the farming community that's going to continue to exist, because it's a huge challenge. You can't just only throw it onto the backs, because our prices change, our economics are challenging at times, like these last couple of years. So we need to think about, if you see a proposition or a ballot measure that has something to do with keeping to fund our infrastructure and to make some improvements, I think we need to think about that, because California's backbone is infrastructure. Whether you love that or not, we are relying on the rim dams and a lot of the investments that were made and really stopped being made in the 70s, essentially, and that we are relying on today.
If you have quick comments, I want to make sure we get to it.
Well, I think maybe this is a great question. I think one thing we haven't talked about today was the legislature this year, with the governor's support, obviously, just extended the Cap and Invest program for safe drinking water. Obviously, nothing's more important than making sure that we all have affordable and good, high-quality water. So, in an age where we're all complaining about things, something was actually done to help with that, and there's a lot of consolidation going on, some of you in this room, a lot of work being done to invest in these disadvantaged communities primarily, but all communities. So that's a really positive. We're not relying on the federal government for that. So let's kind of keep that in mind. Yes, then Senator Harris, Senator Padilla did some things to help kind of support that, but we don't need that. The legislature has actually dealt with that quite well. And then I think this is the second thing I'd add, Jeff, is I know the abundance agenda has obviously got a lot of attention in California, was kind of written with that in mind. And I know there's probably people in here who like that, people who don't like it, but I think it's a really interesting way to think about water, and can we get at the affordability question through kind of that abundance agenda. And that of course means better infrastructure, streamlined regulations, all the things that California is confounded by.
Pete, real quick, and then I got to get to the next question.
Can I be really, really controversial?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
I mean, if you look at San Diego right now, the city of San Diego is raising their rates about 35% over 2 years. But yet, if you look over the whole region, there's about almost, 38 agencies. It's a time to look at consolidation. I mean, one customer in San Diego County pays more or less than another person because they live in a different district. I'm just throwing that out. I mean, is it time to look at consolidation on a grand scale, and would that bring savings? I don't know. I'm just throwing out the question. Is it time to even look at that? I know we do consolidation in the small term in Central Valley to help small communities, but I don't know. I'm just throwing that out, and it's very controversial, obviously. But
one giant water agency to rule them all. That sounds great. I have time for one more question on the internet here. Sorry, we have an internet question here, right? Because my real boss, Sarah Bardeen, says she's going to take this.
This question comes from Tom Philp of the Sacramento
Bee. Oh, no.
And he's asking, he'd be curious to know whether the participants support, even though it's likely not viable in the short term, merging the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project into a state project of undetermined governance as a solution to the changing federal partnership.
Okay, so that's going to fit again any question. Of course, I love that question, but it was written by an editor of the Sacramento Bee. So
what do you guys think the Sacramento Bee will think about that?
Yeah. So careful what you say; it may end up on the front page. So that's good. You're the most vulnerable person here.
Well, I mean, let's get the reality. We tried this in what year was that? 95.
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody correct me. We tried it. There were some pretty serious conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know that it really ever got a lot of traction, did it? It's just a tough political one. Most people, how many people think it would make sense to have a joint state federal water project? Yeah, probably most. But is that practical? Is that where we ought to spend our energy? That's the question I would ask folks. Is that where folks want to be spending their energy, or do we want to spend our energy improving drinking water and rivers and landscapes and everything else?
Okay, so I do want to stop there, and it's great. I'm so glad that the skunk in the room showed up so many times. Not you, the question, sorry. So I do want to remind you, first, I want to thank our sponsors. They were very generous in supporting this, and it's a wonderful thing that they do. I particularly want to thank Katie for that wonderful talk on stuff, the stuff we do, which is you remember the 3 stuff things that we do, which is so great. I also really want to thank our panelists here who endured my badgering for the last hour, and again, it's very kind of you all to show up for all of this. And then those of you who ate lunch, thank you for coming. And particularly I want to thank the high school students who all showed up here and asked the best question of the day. Thank you on that one, because you caught us ignoring the most important questions, so that's good. And then finally, those of you who are online, thank you for tuning in. And to everybody here, we ask you one last favor. There's no such thing as a free lunch with PPIC. We really need your feedback on how this went and ways you would make it go better in the future. So your reviews are incredibly important. And then finally, my menu advisor reminds me, that would be Noonan over here today, that we want you to stick around. This is part of the reason we do this, is so there's a chance to reconnect with each other and hang out and talk, complain about the moderator, whatever it is. We want you to stick around, and I think there's actually food outside. So I am like your grandmother. Please eat. So please eat, stick around, visit, and thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.